C# 10 development is in full swing and is due to be released alongside .NET 6 in November 2021. In this video, we will look at C# 10 new features and examples that are not in C# 9. We will have a look at 5 new C# 10 features, how to implement them, and how they differ from C# 9. And stay tuned to the end of this video, where I'll show you how you can start using C# 10 right now. Now, for more ASP.NET Core tutorials, visit roundthecode.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/roundthecode, and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/roundthecode. So the first feature we're going to have a look at is File Scoped Namespace. Now, in front of me, I've got an example of how a class would look in C# 9. As you can see, we've got the namespace up here and it's wrapped around curly braces. That means for any of the classes inside the namespace, they're always going to be indented to the right. That means we've got this vertical space here that we're wasting. But in C# 10, what you can do is you can remove the curly braces from the namespace and add a semicolon like that. We can now move the actual class to the left-hand side, which means we're wasting less vertical space. And I think that looks a lot cleaner and tidier. You can do the same for this class as well. So remove the curly braces and we'll simply add a semicolon there. And as you can see, it's clean and tidy for us. So we're now going to have a look at record structs. Now, one of the new features of C# 9 was the fact that you could add record classes. One of the benefits of adding record classes is the fact that you can make them immutable. With C# 10, it's gone one step further and you can now add record structs. And I'll show you how to add a record struct that's immutable. So we've got our framework here in our coding language class. We're going to go ahead and actually change these to record only structs. So what we need to do is we need to declare it as read only record struct. With this now, what we can do is we can pass all these properties as parameters as part of the class name. So I'm going to pass in the string, pass in the name as a string, version as an integer, and an instance of coding language as our coding language. That means we can get rid of all of that now, and it's just simply one line. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for coding language now. So once again, we're going to declare it as a read-only record struct. And then all we need to do now is pass in the name as a string type in the parameter. Okay, so we've got that working. What we're going to do now is we're going to test it because we've got a web API open, an ASP.NET Core 6 web API. We're going to go ahead and create a new endpoint in our web API. So we've got our framework controller here. So we're going to go ahead and add a new method. So we're going to call it public, return a type of iActionResult, and call it record structs. I'm going to set it as a HTTP GET method. And the endpoint is going to be record-structs. Quite simply now, we're just going to create a new instance of our framework struct. I'm going to need to pass in a name. We're going to call that .NET. Version, pass it in an integer of 6. And coding language, we're going to create a new instance of our coding language struct. And put in a name of C#. Now we're just going to go ahead and return a type of JSON. So we're going to convert the framework struct into a JSON response. Like that. Okay, let's run our application and see if it actually works for us. So you can see our application is now running. So let's have a look. We've got our endpoint up here. So let's try it out in Swagger and see if we get a response. As you can see, we've got a 200 response, and the response body is the framework struct that we just created. So that's how you go about actually adding record structs. Next thing we're going to have a look at is constant interpolated strings. Now, interpolated strings are very handy because it means you can insert an object inside a string without actually coming out of the string. Now in C# 9, it was perfectly acceptable to do this as a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new endpoint. I'm going to call it constant interpolated strings. And we're going to set the endpoint as constant interpolated strings with hyphens. So this was completely acceptable in C#9. So we're going to declare two variables here, a language release prefix of C#10, and we're going to go ahead and create another one. And this is where we add the interpolated string. So we prefix a dollar next to it. And what we can do now is we can get the language release prefix variable and stick it inside the string like that. And we can just put a message saying to be released in November 2021. Then we can go ahead and just return that as a JSON, the language release. So yeah, you could do that in C#9, but in C#10 you can now, because these strings are not going to actually change, we can actually set these as constant strings. Like that. So that's a new feature of C#10. Let's give that a run and just make sure it's going to work for us. So we now got the application running, so let's just go ahead and just make sure that's going to work for us. Let's execute it in Swagger. And as you can see, it's returning our C#10 is to be released in November 2021. So you can see there, it's returning our language release prefix and then the text after it. The next feature we're going to have a look at is extended property patterns. Now, extended property patterns are very beneficial for doing a condition on a nested property. It makes it a lot cleaner, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So, if we go ahead and we're going to create a new static class here. I'm going to call it get full coding language. Go ahead and make that a little u. I'm going to pass in an instance of our framework struct. What we're going to do here is we're going to do a switch statement. So we're going to pass in coding language, and we want to do a nested condition here. So if the coding language in our framework instance is C#, then we're going to return a string of C#, but as the word. Otherwise, we're just going to return unknown. Like that. Don't need to do semicolon there. So that's how you do it in C#9, but with C#10 you can make it a little bit cleaner. So we've got our nested property here. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and we can just use the dot to reference the nested property like that. That means we can get rid of some of these curly braces like that, and it makes it a little bit cleaner. We're now going to go ahead and test it to make sure it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this endpoint here. We're going to rename it. So we're going to call it extended property patterns. And also rename the method. And with our framework instance here, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this static method around it. Okay, let's give that a run and make sure it's going to work for us. Okay, so our web API is running. We've got our endpoint here. So let's go ahead and just make sure that's going to run for us. So as you can see there, it's returning C#. So if we go back into our controller, you can see we've got the name of C# there. So it's going through this switch condition. It knows that's C#, so it's going to return the string of C# as the full name. Final feature we're going to have a look at is global using directive. Now, don't you just hate having to import the same namespaces for all the files in your application? Well, in C#10 you no longer have to do that. You can set them up globally and then they will automatically be imported into all the files in your application. And I'll show you how to do that. So what they recommend you do is you go ahead and create a new file. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to call it global using. We're going to take out the default templated stuff. And we're going to come back here. We're going to move these namespaces into here. And we're going to prefix a global keyword next to them. Go back into our framework controller now. You'll see that they are now grayed out. That means we don't need to import them anymore because we've got them in our global using file. So we can quite simply go ahead and remove it. And there you go, it's saving a bit of horizontal space there. Now this video was recorded in August 2021 and C# 10 isn't due to be released until November. However, you can download Visual Studio 2022 right now and start using C# 10. You can go ahead and create an ASP.NET Core 6 project and start using C# 10. Just remember to download Preview 3 or above. If you're watching this after C# 10 has been released, you can just download Visual Studio 2022 as normal. So there's some of the new features in C# 10. There doesn't seem to be any major new features in C# 10, as most of it seems to stem around cleaner coding. I'm sure you agree though that having cleaner code and more readable code is a lot better when developing an application. Now thanks very much for watching and hit a like on the video.